Hello, I'm Mark Sumners, host of the Channel Chat podcast show, and today I have the charming Mark Forster, MD of Comscare in the house. How are we doing, Mark?
Well, it's the first time I think I've ever been referred to as charming, but I'll take it, Mark. Thank you for that.
Right, Mark, obviously, thanks so much for coming on. First of all, you did rob me of my award. I wasn't happy about that.
Rob.
Yeah,
well,
Rob.
You borrowed it a while back, I seem to recall. But what I loved was the fact that you congratulated us, and there was a couple of the others sort of shortlisted, which were so quick to say congratulations on it, because it is a bit of a pill. I've had to swallow it for the past 6 years. So, no, it was great recognition for us. We're very happy. But thank you, Matt.
Congratulations. That well, I would say well deserved, but it's still a bit too early to say that.
It's still is it? Okay.
I'll say that you've got it. We'll start with that. So, Mark, as I alluded to on our communication, I think, and I almost want to sort of kick off with that award really, because mental health is a topic that's been going and talked about for the last sort of 7 or 8 months. It has accelerated through COVID. There's no doubt about that. And in fact, when you have the awards, like the Channel Awards, that is a time when, if you do get recognition, you can all celebrate as a team, etc., etc., etc. Now, most firms, I think, are really struggling to identify the issue of what's going on in their teams, and I'm almost interested in sort of thinking what your thoughts are when you did win the award, because even just celebrating that award, it must be quite challenging for people, because normally you'd be given a high fives, pat on the back, etc., etc., but was there a bit of a down on it as well? Because it was like, people were saying to me, Mark, lucky you didn't win it, Mark, because you didn't get a chance to go up on stage and all that sort of stuff, so you want to win it next year. So what were your thoughts around that, first of all?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was absolutely, and I am absolutely buzzing. And I think it's a credit to the CRN that they continue doing it, because I think the industry still needs to recognise, however that is, we physically can't get together. So I still think that the recognising of people that have done some very special things throughout this period is hugely important. So big credit to them. And I am buzzing, because it was like a big rubber stamp. We think that we're doing a good job. We think that we're doing the best thing, exactly the same as you guys. We think that we're doing a phenomenal job for our partners, and that our peers will respect the work that we're doing. So to get that big rubber stamp to say Service Provider of the Year 2020, over the moon. And then there's a couple of minutes later. And that couple of minutes later is kind of where it's sunk home, and the romanticist in me was looking up in like old pictures of any of the events where we're embracing and the champagne bottles going round, and you're walking from table to table, and you're getting the pats on the back, and you feel 10 foot tall, and as a 5'9" individual, I need those moments. So it was bittersweet, I think, is probably the best way, but I'm absolutely over the moon that we won it. And now we've just got to find, that's our challenge now, to find our ways on how we can make our people feel part of it. Yeah. How can I get my arms around our entire organisation to say, this is yours. You did this, not me, not the person who went on the stage, you. That's our challenge now.
Because, it's well documented about working from home or living at work and all that sort of stuff. But one thing is a definite: if you're working at home, you are isolated much more than your team. And if you can't high five and say congratulations, Mark, on the award. I had to WhatsApp you, or you get on a Zoom call or whatever, and it isn't the same. It isn't the same. So, what strategies have you got in place, or Comscare have got in place to sort of tackle and mitigate any sort of well-being challenges you're facing at your firm?
So, I mean, well-being challenges. I suppose it's kind of a tangent away from the awards, and I think we're very similar to lots of organisations which are being more and more responsible in this. Yes, we've got mental health first aiders, like lots of organisations do, that are specifically trained to help. We do monthly newsletters which have got all of the details around different institutions, different organisations which are doing phenomenal stuff, better than I could ever do in terms of in trying to help somebody's mental health. People like Mind, or the Every Mind Matters off the NHS website, all free resources which are phenomenal. So we promote those a lot. We've got assistance programs across the organisation which all the associates can benefit from. We've done stuff before this crazy world. We used to get people coming in to do various bits and pieces from creative. We use creativity quite a lot, as much as we can do, around stimulating positive mental health. But for me, all of that, and I think we do as much as, if not more, than any other organisation regarding this space, because it's something that's very dear to us. But all of that is sand and dust without creating the right environment for individuals. And it's great sending emails, it's great sending newsletters, it's great promoting these organisations which are so instrumental in helping people feel better. But unless you're maintaining an environment where people feel that they can talk, you might as well do nothing. I mean, that's a remiss throwaway statement. It's not what I mean, but it's tantamount to just not doing enough unless that environment promotes open discourse about anything.
Yeah, because it's interesting, Mark, you say that, because, you know, I love seeing the statements out there and the slogans, you know, it's okay not to be okay and all this sort of stuff. But it doesn't mean anything unless someone actually finds out what's going on. Most people are embarrassed about telling someone they've got an issue, you know, especially salespeople. There's a lot of bravado out there in our industry, and we're in a very, very fast-paced industry. And I think they're embarrassed about it. So how do you think we can make it easier for people to be able to reach out if they have a problem? And I'll caveat that, Mark, because I have heard people saying, oh, well, you know, we have a Zoom call with 20 people on and we ask everyone if they're okay. And no one says nothing, Mark. Everyone says they're okay. It's like, well, of course they're going to bloody say they're okay because there's 20 people listening. You know, so how do we make sure it's palatable to actually be able to say, yeah, I'm actually, Mark, I'm not all right, actually, but, you know, I'd like to have a chat about how I can do something about it.
Mark, my friend, we are on exactly the same page. And we operate in a similar sphere. So we see the same posts on LinkedIn or Twitter with somebody, and there was that same post, I don't remember, a couple of months ago, there was a post that went viral about if you've just been out of a job right now and you're struggling, I just want to let you know that I'm here, drop me an inbox, whatever. And I noticed that same status on about 15 different people within my network. And then I put myself in the position of the person that might need help. And I see that status across 15 people. And it's great on the one hand that it starts to maintain that people are talking about it. But on the other hand, do I feel empowered, or do I feel that that's a genuine ask of somebody? When I've seen it 15 times, putting a post, it's okay not to be okay, and stuff like that, and thinking that you're doing enough, to me, is like giving £1 to a homeless person and think you're making a difference to homelessness. It's not.
Yeah, he can buy a cup of tea, but he ain't got a bed for tonight.
I mean, look, and this comes back to the environment that you're doing. I mean, in my opinion, the single biggest thing around mental health is, like you've said there, Mark, that's why I say we're on the same page, is the stigma.
Yeah.
We've got to do more of an industry. We've got to do more as a society, and we've got to do whatever we can do to bring down the stigma and the stigmatization around mental health.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It seems more... I mean, somebody turning around, and God hope nobody listening is suffering, has been touched by it, but something around cancer, or I'm receiving treatment for something along those lines, or an ailment like that, seems to be more socially acceptable to say, I'm speaking to a counsellor.
Yeah.
But then we link these emotive responses to terms like psychiatrist, psychologist, counsellor, that automatically elicits a response, and we just need to be self-aware enough to say, do you know what? That's somebody getting help for a challenge that they're overcoming.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, completely agree with that, because there's no doubt about it. You know, whilst there's a variety of mental health issues out there, whether it's anxiety, you know, depression, addiction, whatever it is, isolation seems to be a common trigger. And you know, people are, you know, it's that sort of thing, is it? You know, how are you doing? Yeah, I'm all right, I'm okay. No one's going to say, no, I've got a real problem, Mark, and I don't know what to do about it. No one wants to see that, because they almost like preamble the statement, almost like saying, well, actually, I do feel a bit of a pansy saying this, but I've got X, Y, Z. It shouldn't be like that, because if you've got a problem, you should be able to generally reach out to someone and actually talk about it, because obviously if you can talk about it, it does actually alleviate the problem even more. But there's so much stigma in the industry about it. How do you think we can, apart from just the stigma, but how can we actually, do you think, help people not feel isolated so they can actually have the confidence? Because whilst they could have come up to Mark at the coffee, at the water cooler, and said, Mark, you know, I've got a bit of a problem or whatever it is. Now it's like, oh, Mark, can I book a 5 o'clock Zoom meeting with you to discuss issues? They're not going to do that naturally, are they? And it's, and especially if they're not feeling well enough at the moment, the last thing they want to do, and don't take this the wrong way, Mark, is book a 5 o'clock Zoom meeting with Mark Forster at 5 o'clock to talk about, they've been lonely that day or whatever it is. So how do you think we can break down that stigma and make sure it's something that shouldn't be shrouded in guilt or shame?
So I can relate that to how I do this within Comms Care, or how I attempt to do this within Comms Care. And you're 100% right in what you said earlier. When you get managers of looking at a screen full of 20 people and then say, "You all right? Is everybody okay? Any issues today? Because we've got 5 minutes now, so we can just wrap up. But is there any issues today?" And you expect somebody to say, "I feel lonely." That's not going to happen in a room full of 20 people. No. It's really not. So there's kind of a number of sort of policies that we try to maintain virtually now. So before lockdown, so I have a cup of tea with every new starter at Comms Care. Every single new starter at Comms Care, I have a cup of tea. Yeah.
Over Zoom, you booked and have a chat.
Yeah. Before that, it was a real cup of tea, and we used to, and we've got 250 people work for us at Comms Care, and the whole purpose that I used to have to ask questions: is Jaffa cake a biscuit or a cake? We used to talk about football. We used to talk about family. Didn't really talk about work at all, because all that I was trying to do was try to maintain the sociable nature and the sort of approachability of me. And because people label managing director or whatever, I wanted everybody to feel they can talk to me about anything, whether it's a biscuit, a cake, or football, the kids, whatever. That was the first kind of thing, and that's continuing, and that's continued in lockdown. So we do it virtually now, and it's all a bit banter, and we have a bit of a laugh and stuff, and that's all well and good. And then the next one is what everybody calls around the open door policy, the virtual open door policy, is that anybody can be somebody. I don't care who you're talking to. Don't care if it's me. Don't care if it's your line manager. Don't care whoever it is, as long as you're talking to somebody who potentially can help or not help, or just talking.
Yeah.
But as a culture and in an atypical hierarchical business, and that's something that we've never been, that managers start to resent people potentially if somebody goes above them. Well, why are they not talking to me?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? If one of my team's talking to my gaffer's gaffer, then why are they not talking to me? And then they see it as a challenge on them, when it's absolutely not at all. And we just need to kind of, we as a senior team, or as leaders, if we're lucky enough to have that title, need to be doing whatever we can do to get rid of that, to say, don't care who you talk to.
Yeah, break down all those barriers. Absolutely. One thing I can confirm to the channel, though, in answer to your question, is Jaffa cake is a biscuit. There's no. I'm sorry, Mark. There's no debate about that. It is not a cake. It is firmly a biscuit. So just want.
I'm with you. I'm with you on
that. Now, there's one thing identifying the problem, Mark. You've got the problem identified, and say someone has the confidence to come up to you and say, in their cup of tea, Mark, I'm feeling depressed, anxiety, lonely, or whatever the issue is. How have you dealt with it, and how do you think firms can help overcome these mental challenges once it's identified? Because half the time, if someone comes up to you, it's almost like a hot potato. It's like, I don't know how to deal with this problem. I've never had any experience. So how have you dealt with it in Comms Care?
I mean, like I said, so we've got our mental health first aiders, which are trained and have got all the skills, and more importantly than anything, because the mental health first aiders, the people within the business, they're HR people, they're project people, they're 1,002 different roles. So as much as anything, it's knowing the tools and the resources which are available to them, with people far more intelligent than myself can actually do to make a material difference to people. But I think from that point on, that once somebody, so if somebody comes to me and talks about anything around mental health, and anybody is welcome across the industry to talk to me about anything. It doesn't have to be Comms Care, Ingram. Do you know what I mean? And I think that's something else that we need to get better with, is that then it's not the pound in the cup of the homeless person.
Yeah.
It's the fact that you're keeping going back. So if you do need to bring other people in, that's okay. People aren't necessarily opening up to you because they're seeking answers from you. They're not necessarily looking for you to fix anything. And that's what we tend to do as leaders. We think if somebody comes into the office and brings us a challenge, as a leader, I need to fix it. Well, that's not always the case. Sometimes it's just a case of listening to somebody talk about mental health in a non-stigmatized, non-judgmental way, which challenges any subconscious biases that we may or may not have, and can divert them or talk to them about resources or people that can help. But then once that session is done, is checking in on a week, on a month. How are you going on with that? Is that made a difference to you? Do you want to talk about other resources? Are you finding any benefit of it? Are you keeping up with it? A million or two reasons after that.
Because Mark, that it is that being that empathetic leader, isn't it? Because when you talked about there, you said about a cup of tea. Now, if someone had said to me, if you'd have said to me, Mark, do you want to come to a cup of tea? I'd be thinking, am I in trouble here? And what have I done here, etc. Because normally it's almost like, what's your forecast? What's your down? And it's very, very serious conversations we normally have at work. But as a leader, you're in charge of the well-being of your staff. And if they go down, your forecast and your sales note, they're out the window anyway, regardless. So it's interesting. You mentioned about the cup of tea. Do you think there's a danger that people feel that they're crossing the line, and the lines are getting blurred into sort of personal lives and work life anyway? But when do you feel that some employees or employers are they're worried about crossing the lines, thinking, they're getting too close to their employees, or they're too interested in them?
That's a real good question, and I think you're right. I think those lines are blurring, and I think it depends upon the type of leader that you are. I mean, I've always been a hugely empathetic manager of people. I was once told in a year's work placement at university that I would never be a manager because I'm too nice. Because I'm very, very empathetic.
I did say you were charming at the start. See, I told you. I was right.
So now here I am. So I actively promote myself in. People follow me on Instagram, and I'm fine with that, because everything that I do on social, on my personal life, or anything like that, is making it more inviting to talk to me. And if that helps with one person, say, yeah, he's got managing. He's managing director. It makes no difference. I'm going to talk to him about how I feel really challenged because my kid's coming home really anxious because they're doing mocks and they don't know if it's going to count towards the GCSEs right now. Brilliant. Job well done. So it's a real blurring, and don't get me wrong, there are certain things which you may as a leader not want to go into around somebody's personal life from a leading question. But that's why when we're doing the cups of tea, it's all questions which are completely unharmful around biscuits and this, that, and the other. And one of the questions they're actually asking that is, do you know who your boss's boss is? Do you know that? Or who your ultimate director is? That's the other question which every single person gets asked. And 9 times out of 10 they don't, because people worry about their immediate sales manager.
Right.
You don't necessarily think, right, well, it's going to go into that, and then it's into that BDM or whatever. But that's important, because if you can't talk to your manager, then you should be able to talk to their manager, or you should know there's another step that you can always take. The worst thing that anybody, I think, in an organization can feel, especially when we talk about mental health, is the feel that they've exhausted the options.
Yeah, absolutely. I think and that's so prevalent. That I think and this is one of the reasons I wanted to really do this series up to as we come up to Christmas, because there's no doubt about it. Everyone's had a tough year in all sorts of reasons, whether it's been families with kids at home, if it's isolations, or domestic violence has been going up, and people losing jobs, and loads of different stuff. And yet, people don't sometimes look at the root of the problem. Why is this happening? Why is this actually happening? Is it just they've got a problem at home, or is it actually they've got some issues they ain't got to deal with? So I completely agree with what you've said there. My last question is, Mark, once you've identified it and you've had that conversation, you've got some ongoing progress, where do you think the next logical step is to reintegrate them into the team? Because once, say, for instance, it's been identified, there's that stigma, there's that shame. They might have been able to tell you, but they might not be able to tell other people. Do you think there's a delicacy into it? Was like thinking it's quite delicate to treat it with kit and gloves, or do you think it's encouraging them to sort of like share with their teammates?
I think, first and foremost, talking about that integration with the team is, I don't think there should have been any initial segregation anyway, unless they've been off for a period of time or anything along those lines. But there's no difference, and ultimately, utopia for me would be that somebody suffering from something mental health wise, and they're still working in the same way as part of the team, as if they've broken a leg, or they've sprained the wrist. This is where we need to get to, in terms of that there is no stigma if you sprain your wrist. You're still working, you're still part of the team. Nobody looks at you and says, "I'm not sure whether this project's too big for you," and it should be the same within mental health. It should be exactly the same. But we apply these stigmas to it. So, I mean, in terms of encouraging people, I think that's purely got to be on a person by person basis, personally, I think. And I think, I mean, and looking at the answers and looking at the things that can make a difference to somebody's mental health, I don't think there is no magic bullet. I don't think there's anything which is going to universally help everybody. So I think it's going to be dependent upon the people. If somebody feels really comfortable, and I've seen it in Comscare, senior sales or people within the organisation sending emails across the business to say, listen, this is the anxieties that I suffer from. I'm putting it out there, and these are what then happens to me. But this is the person that I am. And the wave of support that this individual got on the back of this to say, I empathise with that. I understand what you're talking about. The same thing happens to me is brilliant. But somebody else who might be suffering from depression, for example, and have their own way of managing that, might not want the rest of the team, the organisation. So it's got to be a case-by-case basis, which is where I think the mental health first aiders and speaking to people with training can ultimately help with.
Yeah, Mark, look, fantastic. You've been a fantastic guest. Thanks so much for your time. And do you know what? I'd just like to sort of end on that. I think there's no doubt about it. If COVID has taught us anything, leaders have now got to be much more empathetic. We've come from that 80s and 90s where it's been quite dictatorial sort of leadership, and it's changed slightly over the last sort of 5 or 6 years. But if nothing has taught us anything else about actually, and I'm not going to get too philosophical about life, but my God, with people dying and people having real challenges, we really have got to be delicate about people's sort of mental health and state, and hopefully it will be a thing of the past in 2021, and our industry will be better off for it. There's no doubt about that.
No, I think you're right, and I think we can all do little things to make a difference. I think we've just got to be self-critical of the people we are. It's like when we end a call, like we're wrapping up now. When we end a call on Teams, we end a call. So somebody could get an absolute roddie around the sales number, and then they end the call. Now that person's then home alone.
Yeah.
For 4 hours. Now, what happens in the office is you see them having a cup of tea. Oh, you're all right. Did you see the football? And there's this leveling that this person knows that they're not hated or they've not been ostracized for not hitting the number, because you get these little pseudo rationalizing moments that kind of keep parity across the relationship. So, I mean, and that's us being sort of self-aware and finishing a call after that thinking that person's going to be on their own, or that person is in a situation I'm not sure of now for the next 4 hours. How do I want to leave that person?
Yeah, brilliant. Mark, you've been a great guest. Thanks so much for your time. Thank you.
Always a pleasure speaking to you, Mark. Stay safe, baby.
Thanks for joining us and listening to another episode of our Channel Chat podcast. If you've enjoyed what you've heard and are listening on iTunes, please could you give us a review and subscribe in order to get the newest episodes as soon as they're released. Otherwise, as always, we release an episode every Thursday at midday, so hopefully you can join us then.